Good morning to Oliver Bethe, CEO of Allianz. We are your guest and you're our host, and we had a wonderful evening and dinner here in the house, top of the roof. And thank you very much for hosting us. It's a really great signal of supporting the transatlantic relationship. And a very warm welcome as well to Clark Price. He had a difficult job during the last years because he was the highest representative of the United States in Germany. Imagine we had 3 years no ambassador in Berlin. But he did it in such an excellent way that I thought myself, why they brought us now a new ambassador? Everything was fine with you. So thanks for the support in very difficult times. Thank you very much. It was wonderful to meet with you. And then, of course, special welcome to our partner organization. I don't know if times of gender, I can say sister organization, or it's better than brothers organization. ASG, American Council on Germany, John Emerson, with his wife Kimberly and Steve Sokol. It's great that they are here and that you're always supporting us in the German-American Conference. It's a really great friendship. Thanks for coming. And then, dear members of the Atlantik-Brücke and ACG, ladies and gentlemen, the German-American Conference at the annual conference of Atlantik-Brücke in cooperation with our American sister organization ACG is always a special event. This year especially because after 3 years we can finally meet again in person. The German-American Conference always brings together the best minds dedicated to our common cause, nurturing and developing relations between our two countries, supporting our cultural, political, economic, and also military partnership, and strengthening the values that form the foundations of the Euro-Atlantic community. And all of this, above all, through the personal friendship that continue to be forged and sustained us on both sides of the Atlantic. And as a particular example of this, I'm delighted to welcome again my friend John Emerson, because without him, we would not be able to work through the pandemic. It was really great to see you on Zoom, but it's much greater to see you in person. You helped us a lot to come over these or through these difficult times. But the German-American Conference in 2022 is even more special. First, because it has been 3 long and exhausting years since we last met for the German-American Conference. If somebody had claimed during our last meeting in 2019 that a global pandemic would bring the world as we know it to a halt and make the next 2 conferences impossible, no one would have believed it. The scale and impact of the COVID pandemic that broke out in 2020 is still not fully understood, and it's far from being under control. So the simple fact that we are here together in a room, shaking hands and looking each other in the eye, seem a small miracle. It's also a relief because after 2 years of video conference, I think we can all agree that you can't Zoom trust. Trust is at the heart of this year's conference. It's essentially to our German-American relations. It's also why our partner, Allianz, commissioned a survey on the state of trust. Mr. Bethe will speak about that. I'm not taking much away from the presentation of the results when I say that the survey results can serve to strengthen trust in ourselves. Second, because German-American relations, partnerships, and friendships have regained strength. When I think about the outlook for our partnership that we had in 2019, when we last met for this conference, it seems like a difference between night and day. On the top level at that time, politically, you could get the impression that there were 2 adversaries facing each other. Trade conflicts, uncertainties about NATO, and mutual distrust were the order of the day. With the election of US President Joe Biden, the transatlantic partnership was renewed, and in a view of a common challenge to the Euro-Atlantic alliance posed by the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, the earlier conflicts now seem as if they have fallen out of time. For us Europeans at least, it shows once again that there is no desirable alternative to the alliance of democracies on both sides of the Atlantic. Dear friends, but the fact that we are together in a conference center is not the only miracle that our being together here in the Alliance Forum makes visible. The second miracle is very much embodied by the two host organizations of the German-American Conference, the American Council on Germany and Atlantik-Brücke. As sister organizations, we are celebrating our 70th anniversary this year. And remember, a few years after bitter enemyship, war, and genocide, there were people who had the courage to overcome these past experiences, to try to turn former enemies of war into partners and friends. What a great idea very soon after the Second World War. And this despite the fact that they were among those who were persecuted by the National Socialist tyranny in Germany, and that many of their friends or relatives were among the victims. As an example of this, I would like to remind you of just two of these courageous people, John McCloy and Eric Warburg. The fact that this courage led to success and that today we come together as friends and partners as a matter of course still seems like a great miracle in retrospect. After the war, the future of relations between the United States and Germany was uncertain, but I suspect hardly anyone would have placed their bets on a relationship that can best be described today as a deep partnership between democratic countries born of mutual trust and respect. It took not even one generation, not even a human lifetime, to move from bitterest enemy and murderous hatred to such a tremendously successful and far-reaching friendship and partnership as we have now experienced for so long. I don't think that back then, 70 years ago, anyone believed that this would be possible. For me, especially in view of the monstrosities of war that we are against experiencing in Europe, this is a great sign of hope. What can succeed when people really want it, and if they're given the opportunity to do this? The German-American friendship is proof that a better future is possible, ladies and gentlemen. The present, however, shows us that peace and partnership, unfortunately, cannot be taken for granted, even today. This is the third reason that makes our conference this year so special and important. Since February 24th, war has returned to Europe with Russia's unprovoked attack on Ukraine. This Russian war is still raging. The circumstances under which at least the fighting might end remain unclear. And while the transatlantic partners have moved closer together, showing a level of cooperation and cohesion that has been lacking, Russian aggression has also revealed different perspectives on this conflict within Europe. Germany, not least, is facing significant criticism, which, whether justified or not, certainly calls into question Germany's and, by the way, also France's leadership role within the European Union. It's largely thanks to the commitment and leadership of the United States that these differences have not become serious threats to European and transatlantic unity in the fight against Russian aggression. This is also true. In any case, for the first time in this recent history of the Federal Republic, German foreign policy has failed like never before since 1948. For the first time, Germany's foreign policy can be seen as a complete failure because of its policy towards Russia. I'm saying this because I, by myself, as many of you know, were a member of the government and member of the Foreign Office. We, including myself personally as a member of the Bundestag and a member of the federal government, have assumed for too long that our experience of overcoming hostility and war through economic cooperation and integration in Europe, our experience with the old Soviet Union, and the peaceful transformation to Germany's unity can ultimately be applied to our dealings with Russia. The majority of us Germans thought that with the idea of change through rapprochement and stable relations through economic integration, we had found something like a magic formula for dealing with authoritarian regimes in Moscow. The decades of success of our policy have made many of us arrogant in the face of warnings from our Eastern European partners and also from our American partners. I openly admit that this failure of our foreign policy is also for me a personal burden as a former member of the German parliament and government. And I think we would do well to investigate and not to ignore it too quickly what happened in that time, why we were so deeply convinced that economic cooperation with Russia would lead us to stability and peace. It's much more than on economic interests. So even if it's painful, we have to review our politics of the last decades, because the conviction that Russia could be civilized by economic cooperation was shared by nearly 80 to 90% of the German politicians and the business community. So if it would have been a single mistake of one or other politician, maybe that would not be so important. But we have to discuss it because a broad majority in our society thought this would be the right way, and that we ignored the warnings from our Eastern partners and from the Americans. I think to learn the lessons is maybe the most important responsibility for us to do so. But we have to learn it's not economic success that's the currency in Russian politics, but pure power interests. Russia is willing to pay sanctions like a kind of superpower tax. That's the perspective of the Russian president. Geopolitics beats geoeconomics. Not only, but especially we Germans are so dramatically affected by this change of times because our entire economic and political model of success is built on the opposite. That's why we feel the changes in our policy are so drastic, because they involve much more than increasing the defense budget by 100 billion euros. The Federal Republic's business model is being put to the test. In the midst of parallel and mutual overlapping crises, ranging from pandemic, the disruption of global supply chains, rising energy prices, inflation, climate change, and our rivalry with China. Crisis, in other words, none of which can be addressed alone, and where even transatlantic cooperation is only a necessary but not yet a sufficient condition for our collective success. It is not the end of diplomacy, nor is the end of globalization, but it's the end of the belief that the sole peacemaking power of common economic interests, and thus a turning point in German policy, foreign policy. The more intensively we deal with this, the more likely it is that we will be able to meet these challenges in present. And our most important partners, the United States of America, also have their own domestic challenges. The fact that they are nevertheless once again entering into a conflict with a hostile power, Russia, in the interest of Europe, is something we cannot credit our friends in the United States with highly enough. In the future, however, they will have an even greater right to expect us to assume our own responsibility more strongly and to share the result burden fairly. And by the way, of course, the next presidential elections in the United States is also for us a challenging situation. I remember very well when I was Secretary of State in 2017 and the former Secretary of State of the Trump administration asked us in the G7 meeting in Italy why he should discuss about Ukraine. He said, that's not an issue for Japan and not for the United States, it's a purely European issue. And when we asked him, do you really think that's true? He laughed and said, no, I'm not, but I wanted to know how my president is thinking about this. So I think we have to do a lot whenever it's possible together with the United States, but also as a stronger Europe. We need to understand to survive in the world of today and tomorrow, we need each other. We are only at the beginning of the global debate about what the world order of our century should look like. Today we are living more in a kind of G0 world. For the old world order of the post-war period of World War II has with some delay long since come to an end. Russia's invasion of Ukraine shows that we are currently living in a world without any order. It's still unclear what the new order will look like. Much will depend on how united the democracies of the world are, which we used to call the West. This never meant, by the way, a geographical term, but always a common normative idea that every human being is born free and that his or her rights of freedom may neither be granted nor withdrawn by a state. No state confers these rights of freedom, and no state has the right to withdraw them, because they are universal and the personal property of each individual. This is essential what we meant and what we mean when we talk about a community of values among democracies. That freedom is inalienable and that it exists regardless of where a person is born or lives. This idea of freedom, coupled with responsibility for another, is what unites us in the democracies of the world. And it is what we do not want to give up, even in the world of the 21st century. So there's a lot at stake. We probably have a decade of peacelessness ahead of us. That doesn't mean that we will necessarily enter a period of constant wars, such as we're currently experiencing in Ukraine, but uncertainty, instability, unpredictable dynamics, disinformation, and conflict will characterize the next few years. To survive in this time of growing uncertainty, strong alliances are needed. The game of bowling alone is dangerous in the 21st century for Europe as well as for North America. We must never allow ourselves to feel that this partnership is not worth the effort it takes to remain vibrant, innovative, and fit for the future. The German-American Conference is a small contribution to this. I think this year's program gets to the heart of the challenges we have faced very well. We could not have asked more competent panelists and speakers. Thank you for your contribution to our conference. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the great teams of ACG and Atlantik-Brücke. None of them would been possible without your support and your help. Thank you very much to our common team. And again, we are grateful to our partner for this year's conference, Allianz, for hosting us in their wonderful facilities here at the heart of Berlin, and for being a great supporter of German-American friendship. Allianz not only provided us with a venue for our meeting, but also, as I said, conducted a survey as results of which we will inform much more of our debate on German-American relations. One finding I found particularly interesting, I would say it again because for me it was surprisingly, that these generations which never experienced the Second War or the Cold War, that a vast majority of this generation thinks that the best times of transatlantic partnership is just to come. So I think this is a very strong signal of hope. So we should strive to build a better world again with confidence and trust in our relationship. We have every reason to do so. Together we are the largest economies of the world. We are resilient, innovative, and liberal. Our diversity and pluralism are our strength, not our weakness. We believe in partnerships and not dependencies. We believe in the rule of law and not on the rule of power. I look forward to the great American-German conference, and again, I thank our friends from the ACG to organize it in Berlin. It's always great to do something with you together for our friendship and partnership. Thanks again, and now, Clark Price, the floor is yours.